welcome to Plead the Cause, where we plead the cause for orphaned and vulnerable children around the world. This podcast is brought to you by Heart of the Bride Ministries. My name is Brian Chrisman, and I'm the Executive Director of Heart of the Bride. And we are taking a pause on our normal recordings to go ahead and bring you something special over the next few weeks. On Saturday, November the 4th, we celebrated our 25th anniversary with a special banquet where we told the story of Heart of the Bride and got some current updates and cast vision for the future. And it was a very special event attended by many here in the local area, and even some who traveled hundreds of miles to be with us. And so we wanted to give you the opportunity to participate in this with us, but instead of giving you the whole hour and a half in one sitting, we're going to break it up into segments because we told the story of Heart of the Bride that night in segments. And so today we're going to give you just the first little portion of it, which is the history of Heart of the Bride, the very beginning, how it started. And it's shared by someone very special. Our founder, Tony Gibson, was back with us that evening. And we sat there on stage, and he just shared about how God spoke to him and brought Heart of the Bride to be, how that burden developed, and really how God spoke to them in some very specific ways, he and his wife Faith. So I hope you will listen through this and just hear about how God moved, how God spoke, because it's very important not only for our past but also our future, and how God directs us in ministry and how he's leading us into the future. So I hope you'll listen to this and join us in the next few weeks so that you can really participate in the entire banquet with us. So this is Tony Gibson, our founder, with me at our 25th anniversary banquet.
It's humbling to think that God has been doing this work through Heart of the Bride for 25 years. And this room is such a great representation of what he's done and who he's used to do it. People who've been with us for 25 and even before that, just as the ministry was forming, and people who've only been partnered with us for a short time, and even in a little while, you'll hear from a church that's just now entering into partnership with one of our partner ministries. And so tonight, we want to kind of revisit a lot of that and just kind of tell the story of Heart of the Bride and go back to the beginning and start there, talk about how God has done that, who he's done it through, and then we're going to visit a little bit about what he's doing now and share the vision about the future as well. And so I want to go ahead and invite up our founder. So people, when they ask me, how did you get started at Heart of the Bride Ministries, it's a really short, quick answer. It's I married the founder's sister. So that's the short, quick answer, but God brought us here. And so I want to invite Tony Gibson to the stage, the founder of Heart of the Bride Ministries. So let's welcome him here tonight. Thanks for being here, Tony. Yeah, you go there. You go there. Yeah. I don't know. I got my iPad tilted this way, so, you know. Thanks for being with us tonight. Sure appreciate you being here. So, well, I asked Tony tonight, I want to give him the chance just to kind of even start the evening to talk about how Heart of the Bride began, because it's very important for us to remember how God started this vision, what he said in the beginning, because it is still the foundation of how we operate. And we hold that very dearly and revisit those things often to keep ourselves grounded in what God has called us to do. So, Tony, and Father, by the way, I was going to say, if Faith was not able to be with us here tonight, she wanted to be, but was prevented from being here. So please tell her how much we missed her, and that this celebration is a part of what God has done through both of you, and we acknowledge her sacrifice as well. So please pass that to her.
Hopefully, and she is watching online right now as well, but definitely miss her tonight. It's a privilege to get to share some testimony of how God began this, and the thought of it being 25 years later is a little overwhelming. I don't usually speak from a script. I do an outline, and so I've been rehearsing through my outline the past few days, and every time I start this thing, I cry. So it's kind of going true to form right now. This ministry, it started in a little rent house on 20th Street here in Niceville, a house that I hated living in because it was smoke infested when we moved in, and we had to sell a beautiful home in Texas and couldn't afford to buy one here, and the cost of living in the housing market was a lot more. But God did amazing things in the time that we were living in that house. And it actually started with me laying underneath my piano, a grand piano, one that set off the ground, just calling out to the Lord. You know, I've been reading some testimonies, especially of people who were healers of mine, Keith Green and Rich Mullen, and serving as worship pastor here. And God was just stirring that there's just more to my heart than you know. And just began to really pray in that way. And so when we started, it wasn't really specifically about orphans, but there were three things that were real clear from the Lord in the very beginning. The first was that it was supposed to be something that involved sacrifice, engagement, not just like I'm giving a token and I'm disconnected. And so I've been praying that prayer and literally spending time, you know, on my face before the Lord and asking Him to just reveal His heart, you know. And one night I was driving home down our street and I was listening to a James Dobson broadcast, and it was in the October season, and we actually acknowledge martyrs for the Christian faith during that season, and the broadcast was about that. And God just really struck my heart. And the word that penetrated my life was that, you know, this is the same body. You are in a place of abundance. You are in a place of safety. But these are your brothers and sisters who are around the world, and they're suffering for the same faith. It's the same faith that I died for. These are your brothers and sisters. You don't know them. And so that was the beginning of the stirring of what this would become, which was in my heart what that began to take formation immediately was like, there's got to be a direct connection. This doesn't need to feel like it's something off in the distance that's on the other side of the world. There are people who are not just suffering for their faith, but there are people who are trying to do something for the kingdom that don't have the same resources I have. They've got the same kind of vision. I'm a visionary, and I have had and there's a lot of people in this room through the years who've stepped up and who've done amazing things to help to encourage or support a vision that I've had, to be honest. There are other people who've had this same kind of things all around the world, but they don't have the resources and they don't have people around them. And so the call was like, find a way to get to connect to those people. Now, look, I grew up in a church and actually was serving as a pastor of this church, and we have conventions that do all kinds of missions. And 25 years ago, kind of direct connections and missions, it wasn't as big of a thing. It was like, we give to this fund, and that fund does this, and there's just a disconnect. It was like, how do you get personally involved in a way that you know people, and so that you're not just giving to something that's disconnected from you, but so when you start to give, you're not only investing, but you're sharing, and this is literally the terminology that came from, you're sharing the burden with them. And then the next thing that kind of happened was just the Lord just speaking from the passages in 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 when Paul is, well, in common language, okay, in modern day therapeutic language, he was doing a little bit of shaming, honestly, to the Corinthians, okay? I mean, he was just kind of going, look, there's this need. The Judean Christians are suffering, and they're poor, and they're in famine and all these things, and there's an offering. We want you to participate. And I want to tell you about these brothers over here in Macedonia. They're so poor, but they have just given abundantly and sacrificially to help them. And we're calling you up. You're not, and he was literally telling them, you're not in the same kind of poverty they're in. But I'm encouraging you to participate and to share in this. And that was the beginning of the heart of this. So we didn't have a clue what that meant. And but because it started out with martyrs, I literally got it from there. I wrote a song within the next month, and we decided we were going to record it. And so there's several board members from Texas here. There's a real strong Texas connection to this. Jeremy, who's sitting down here, I've known him since he was 10 years old, and he was a punk at the time, totally. But loves the Lord, his dad too. There's so many connections with that. But I got to go out and be a part of not only a revival but a retreat. And there were some people there, some Christian leaders who were speaking at that time who had a big impact on our lives. And there was just a series of miracles that happened. And part of that was just them speaking over. It kind of started with one of the guys who was just honestly speaking prophetically and said, look, I don't know what's going on, but the Lord is... The Lord is speaking something about you right now to me. And he goes, I see you praying before the Lord, laying under something, and you're just calling out to him. And he's going to show you what he wants you to do. And by the way, I know that you have stepped out in faith to do something, and he's going to provide what you need for that this weekend. And then he also said, and by the way, don't get too excited because this is just the first fruits. He's going to fully show you. You're going to need to give him time to show what this is about. Now, I didn't listen to that part. Okay, I was like ready to go right after that. But so it sure enough happened. We had made a commitment to make a recording for this song about Christian martyrs, to use all the funds to support people, and it all happened. But I didn't have the money. I told the producer, I said, when I come back off this trip, we'll do it. I had zero funds for it. It was going to cost $1,200, and a guy wrote me a check that day for $1,200. Came back into the recording. So there were a ton of things like that God was doing to show us that not just that he wanted us to share from our abundance, but that if we would just step out in faith and we would care enough, that he would provide what we needed. And so the next few years were a series of that. So the other hallmark besides, what I just mentioned and sharing from our abundance is a hallmark of faith, that this ministry would be based on that. It's not just us giving out of our abundance, but also stepping into our own frailty and our own weakness and our own need, and letting God raise us up and to provide through us in the faith that we would exercise. So it's about real personal connection, that's sacrificing, but it's also really about faith. And so, the Lord honestly did in those years, he just provided us so many opportunities to see him do miracles through faith, and he allowed us to be a part of things that we didn't have the resources sitting in the bank to do. So I'm going to kind of, those are the things that were laid out, but several things happened on this campus that were really just, looking back, so meaningful, and moments that the Lord just used to spur that on and to get us to the place that we were going to be. But I'm going to be honest too, I had no idea what the next 25 years would look like. How much joy. There's so many people in this room I do not know, and that's kind of cool, but there's so many people who I do know deeply, and I share some really meaningful life impacting intersections with, where the Lord's just been in our midst because of being a part of his work. And so, the idea of even the name Heart of the Bride, when I was coming out of that retreat, the Lord spoke that, and I was tempted so many times to change the name, even after we incorporated, because people stumbled over there all the time. We were getting out, and we reached a point where we were starting to support orphans, and it's like, what's that about? People called it Heart of the Birdie. We were getting mail at Amy got mail all the time for bridal, shops and stuff like that. And so there was just but it was just clearly what the Lord wanted, because the initial prayer was, Lord, I want to know your heart. And to know his heart, we have to walk with him in the places that he walks. And he doesn't walk with those in affluence. He walks with those who are in greatest need. And that's ultimately where God lives. And so I just kind of want to close out today about how do we get to a place from there. Our first offering was to help people who were suffering for their faith as martyrs. And then we just started sharing as a family. We did things, and then other families would come alongside. It was super personal and super relational, and that's another value that we have that's all about relationship. And that's how we find our partners and have always found them, is through relationships. Somebody that knows, hey, here's this person. I would just ask, I mentioned Jeremy, his dad is like, they were working in Ukraine, and said, hey, do you know anybody over there who's a believer, who really has a vision to do something that they don't have the resources to do? And he said, I do. And we wound up having a connection that has been just life-changing for me. As a matter of fact, as a result of that, my wife and I eventually adopted 3 kids from Ukraine. So super personal, all about personal connections, but also the way that, in that personal side of it, the way that we share the experience of what God's doing in walking in the fields where he's walking, so that we really know his heart. Having the temptation to change that name from a marketing standpoint, it creeped up many, many times. But I'm so thankful 25 years later to be sitting here, because I was listening last week. I live in the Atlanta area now, and I attend a church close to where I live. But as often as sometimes on Sunday mornings, I wake up and I go, I really want to go to Passion City today. And I'm close enough that I can go. And Louis Giglio is a pastor there, and he's just one of my heroes in the faith. And he was talking last Sunday about, the renown of the Lord and how Passion started. It's the life-changing conference that's gone on for 20 years that's literally impacted a generation in our country and around the world. And he was asking the question. He said, do you know the name of your great-grandfather, your great-great? And he just walked up the list, 5 generations. He says, most people don't know 5 generations back. And I started realizing, of my great-grandparents, of the 8 that I have, I know the names of 3 of them. And I have really close, tight-knit families. That was really kind of startling to me. I know 3 of the names of my great-grandparents, and I know nobody beyond that. And I just think about sitting here tonight, 25 years later. Nobody is going to know my name, and I don't care. If it's a generation down the line, and people in here who are connected to this ministry who have no connection to me, praise God for that. But they know the name of the Lord, and the beauty is that they can walk with him in his heart and have the heart of his bride, the one who is walking alongside of him, in stepping into the places of greatest need. And so when we finally transitioned into, kind of formally focusing on orphans and the least of these, I know Cheryl Williamson, who's in the room tonight, she was on the board at that time. I don't think there's anybody else here who was at that particular moment, but we were giving and sharing with a lot of people around the world, and we just went into a time, said, we're scattering, we're going to get down, literally thinking generation, we're going to get down 20 years from now. And I thought that was as long a time span as I could think of, and here we are 25 years later. And we're going to find out that we scattered. We need to ask the Lord what he really, really wants us to focus on. And we've committed to a season of fasting over a period of weeks and concentrated prayer, and that we're not going to talk about it with each other. And Faith and I were both on the board at that time. We didn't talk about it even as a couple. We're going to just ask the Lord to show us what our focus is supposed to be. And then we're going to come back together in a month, and we're going to see what he says. And, to a fault, he either said, the orphans are the least of these. Those were the words that he spoke over us. So it came out of faith, and it came out of his heart. And that's why we're here today. And there's so many rich relationships and so many stories. That the thing that's so cool about it, and hopefully if you're just now hearing this for the first time, and this is a beginning for you to be engaged, or if it's something you've been a part of for years and years, like Greg and his wife Jan and so many others around the room, there is an opportunity to know the heart of the Lord in a very personal way, and to know people who are in places that He is walking and working and wanting to change lives in a way, in a very personal, connected way. And so that's the heart of the ministry. There's a million stories I could tell, but I'm thankful to be able to just share that part of it with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us for this special episode. I'm glad that you were with us and listened to or watched this as we begin this journey of just telling the story of Heart of the Bride and sharing about our history, looking at what God is doing, and even looking forward to the future as God challenges us to 25 more years and beyond of ministry. It's not slowing down. In fact, it's increasing, and He's giving us an even greater vision for the future. At Heart of the Bride, we are here to challenge the body of Christ, His church, to answer the call of James 1:27, to meet fatherless children, orphaned and vulnerable children in their need. And so we're here to challenge you to be the answer. We believe that the church is the answer to the problem of orphaned and vulnerable children around the world. So we hope that you'll join us in this and listen to the next few podcasts and hear how you can be the answer. And you can help us right now by sharing this podcast, liking it, subscribing to it. If you're watching this on YouTube, liking, subscribing, commenting. If you're listening on a podcast platform, liking it, sharing it, whatever it is you can do. Help us get the word out as we challenge the body of Christ to be the answer. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.